ASEAN.
Hello, I'm Atira Nutajuddin, your host for Navigate ASEAN, a series of interviews with some of the region's leading public figures, brought to you by the ASEAN Post. In today's episode, we speak to Jasmin Irisha, a climate advocate from Malaysia, and also a climate and environment consultant at UNICEF. We speak to Jasmin about living a sustainable lifestyle and also about climate change. Thank you, Jasmin, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Atira.
Okay, Jasmin. So we all know that living sustainably is important. It improves the quality of our lives, protect our ecosystem, and preserves natural resources for future generations. But for the average Joe and Jane out there, a sustainable lifestyle can be intimidating. How can one start, and what are some of the ways to live a more sustainable lifestyle?
I think it's really important to put a caveat that not everyone can afford this lifestyle. We live in an era where our consumption pattern as a society are exceeding planetary boundaries. And according to the Global Footprint Network, we are currently using the equivalent of more than one Earth's capacity, 1.7 to be exact, of over-consuming ecological resources and absorption of our waste. So I always believe that we should do what we can within our own capacity. For example, bring your reusable coffee cup when you need to take away coffee, or Tupperware when you want to tap out food from the stall, bring your own bags when you go for groceries, take the public transportation instead of driving, reduce where you can, shop less, recycle properly at designated recycling bins, reuse, upcycle, repurpose your clothes and your other stuff. But those are all of the things that you already know. But I am here to remind you that, it's not really that hard. And again, it's not that hard if you can afford it. This is assuming that your average Jane and Joe, or okay, put it in a more local context, your average Ali and Sarah, for example, are not from a vulnerable or marginalized community. So talking about vulnerable and marginalized communities, these are a group of populations such as the P40, indigenous population, persons with disabilities, migrants and refugees. They are disproportionately impacted by the climate and environmental crisis. Research has shown that more affluent citizens are more responsible towards environmental degradation impacts, and those living in rural areas do not have access to these basic necessities or luxuries such as public transportation, for example. So these are also logistical and systemic issues that are embedded within geographical needs. It is more accessible to buy fast food than ethically sourced food, or logistically, it's also more accessible to buy and shop fast fashion as opposed to going to a thrift store, which you might not have within your own vicinity.
So, Jasmin, I think I speak for everyone when I say we are all tired of rhetoric from lawmakers. Is there anything that governments can do to truly encourage a more sustainable lifestyle?
The government must walk the talk. There are a lot of fancy plans, policies, and commitments in place, and the government must ensure that they are implemented thoroughly at every level. I just wanted to point out two things here. Firstly is to streamline the institutionalization of climate policies at interministerial levels. This is because climate change affects everyone. Climate change is intersectoral and cuts across all ministerial portfolios. Right now in Malaysia, we have a Malaysian Climate Action Council, which is great. But the process of it in itself have to be inclusive and transparent. Like, we want to know what's going on, we want to know the updates. And this being said, having a focus on who are your targeted populations, such as children, women, specific populations in the community is really vital in terms of shaping your policies and how it really conveys to people on the ground. And secondly is to include women and young people at every level of decision-making processes. We need more diversity and representation in the process, and also more inclusive representation, including the indigenous community and the OKU community. They have to be included so that the policies that are being shaped, the decisions that are being made is inclusive. And only then we will see change.
So the UN Secretary-General António Guterres said the report published by the IPCC last August is a code red for humanity. How much trouble are we actually in, Jasmine? And what's the worst case scenario here?
Yeah, I mean, it's safe to say that if we don't take urgent action now, we are heading towards a catastrophic and an uninhabitable future. So the main key findings of the latest IPCC report is that under all 5 emission scenarios, the Earth's surface warming level is projected to reach 1.5 or 1.6 degrees Celsius in the next 2 decades. This is way exceeding the goals of the Paris Agreement. And this also concludes that we are now closer to any point to are reaching tipping points, right? But like, what does that mean for our region? So climate change is affecting our rainfall pattern with varying changes to monsoon precipitation. This also leads to higher flood levels. This also impacts our biodiversity, both terrestrial and marine, and relative sea level around Asia in general has increased faster than global average. And this in turn impacts coastal area loss and shoreline retreats. And we must not forget that all these physical climate impacts also have implications towards our social and economic sectors. So we will be impacted when it comes to housing, settlements, relocating workforce, especially when it comes to the question of, those who are living at the most vulnerable areas like coastlines. There will be in the future increasing climate-induced migration. And are we ready for that?
So I've heard this a lot where people say, there's nothing we can do to save the earth, so let's just use the aircon all day. So Jasmine, is it too late to tackle climate change? And at this point, is there really anything we can do to save the planet?
Well, Athira, you're not the only person who has this question. I get asked this question a lot of times as well. And my answer is it is not too late, but we need to act fast now. There's a climate scientist, his name is Michael E.Mann from the Penn State University, in his new book called The New Climate War, where he wrote, the greatest threat of our time is not climate denial anymore, it's climate delayism and climate doomism. So delaying tactics like greenwashing or masking continuous fossil fuel productions through net zero targets, or going about telling everyone that, oh, we're going to face doom anyway, the world is coming to an end, that's not going to cut it. It is not going to work. And young people now, more than ever, are mobilizing faster and they're more connected than ever before. They are the ones who are leading the change. They are the ones who are demanding world leaders to take action and keeping them accountable. And because of that, I remain hopeful.
So Jasmine, let's touch a bit about COP26. So it often feels like these global conferences and summits, they don't achieve much. Do you think COP26 is any different from the other ones?
The climate conferences have been ongoing for 27 years now. We have COP26, which means that for 26 years, world leaders worldwide have been convening at the same pace, discussing the urgency of climate change and how to solve the problem. And the whole reason or the whole importance why COP keeps on happening is that world leaders can convene at the same place to safeguard the planet so that it will be within a certain amount of limit for a safe threshold. And the difference for COP26 is that we have the latest science and the science is clear. We need to act faster now more than ever. And the main difference now is that we are currently living in a pandemic, and this shifts a lot of global outlook and perspective when it comes to resilience and recovery. But only when world leaders acknowledges that the climate crisis is a crisis and that they are ready to implement direct policy changes once they get back from the negotiations in Glasgow, maybe then there will be a difference. But until then, it's hard to say. We have global international youth climate activists such as Greta Thunberg, who has been repeating her message over and over again, not just at COP conferences, but other world forums for the past few years. We also have local youth activists who have been advocating for the environment and for climate change. To name a few, we have youth activists like E.Mann, Ili Nadia, Aro, who have been really at the forefront of leading the climate movement and mobilization of youth in Malaysia. And one thing that I know for sure is that young people will keep on striking, they will keep demanding for action, and they will keep treasuring world leaders. And I'm one of them.
Thank you very much, Jasmin. We hope to have more discussions with you again in the future. Thank you for being with us today on Navigate ASEAN. You can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and other social media channels by looking for the ASEAN Post. Stay tuned for the next episode of Navigate ASEAN. I'm Atirano Tajuddin. Thank you and have a good evening.
Navigate ASEAN.